This is a tutorial on using the Behavior Incident Report System Excel spreadsheet. This is for spreadsheet version 2.2 that was revised in July of 2020. The spreadsheet was developed by Myrna Vigia, and for any questions and concerns, you can contact me at vigia@usf.edu. When you first open up the spreadsheet, you may get a message that asks if you want to enable macros, and you want to make sure that you say yes, that you do want to enable it. If you don't get a pop-up that asks you about enabling macros, you may get a ribbon at the top that asks you to enable it. And so make sure that you click it and you say enable. When you first open up the spreadsheet, the first tab that you'll see is the Instructions tab, and then you'll see other tabs down at the bottom. You may not see as many tabs as I have on my screen, and that just depends on one, how large your screen is, the width, and also your scroll bar. Sometimes the scroll bar is a little bit longer, and it can come up to, different, just depends on how you have it set. And so in order to adjust that, right next to this scroll bar down here at the bottom right corner, there are 3 dots that you can hover over, and then there is a double-sided arrow that appears. If you hold down your mouse button, the left, then you can scroll this way or that way. So it just depends on how many tabs you want to see at one time. To navigate the tabs, because there are many tabs in this workbook, you actually would do that by clicking on these arrows over here on the bottom left of your screen. And so if you click on the right arrow, that'll scroll everything towards the left, showing you all of the other tabs. And then you can click on the left arrow, and that takes you back to the beginning. So once you come in, you enable macros, now you're ready to use the BIR spreadsheet. And so the instruction tab, like I said, has my name and has my email in case you run into any issues. It has that link in order to access this video. And then it also has some brief instructions on how to get started and which tabs you need to complete ahead of time. The next tab is the Data Entry and Quality Checklist. And on this tab, what you have are just some things for you to keep in mind as you are entering data. And so the first section is the BIRS Data Entry Common Errors. And so these here are just a list of the different things that you might find when you're entering data. So these errors can result in data quality concerns. So we want to make sure that you know that these things can happen and to be sure that you're thinking about them and addressing them before you analyze your data. And so the 3 tabs of data entry are the Program Information tab, the Child Enrollment tab, and the BIR Data Entry tab. Those are the 3 tabs where you will actually enter data. And so the Program Information tab, once we get to it, I'll show you what you'll be entering there. But one of the biggest errors is recording inaccurate counts for the program. And so once I get there, I'll show you where you'll be entering and just kind of what to watch out for. The Child Enrollment tab, that's where you'll be entering children once you get a BIR. And so the Child Enrollment tab, entering children twice, recording incorrect demographic information, and deleting children after they've left the program. So once we get there, I'll show you that as well. And the BIR Data Entry tab. So the Data Entry tab is a series of dropdowns. And so failure to use those dropdowns and typing in responses, that is a good way to have errors. And then typing in the date and time incorrectly, and I'll show you how to do that. And then leaving blanks and any other manipulation of data. So these are just things that before you go to actually look and analyze all of those tables and charts, you want to make sure that all of this, that you've kind of thought about this and make sure that these things have already been addressed and that you know that your data entry is good. Then here we have the BIR Completion Checklist. And so this is about the actual form. And so as you're entering data, some of the things when you have that form in front of you and you're entering it, you want to think about, are the teachers checking one box per criteria? So if you get a form and there's multiple checks in any of those sections, like for problem behavior or motivation or anything like that, then you want to make sure that that's addressed, because it should always just be one response for each one of those variables. And then are all necessary fields being completed? So do you have any missing data? So maybe one of those was missed, and so you want to make sure that you can address that as well. Are teachers leaving blanks when they don't know? And so for each one where the teacher may not know, there is a possible response that's either don't know or it's not applicable. And are there increases in uses of don't know as a response? So, is the motivation always being checked off as don't know? And so that might need to be addressed with some PD. And then are multiple BIRs being turned in for the same child within a small time frame, meaning that you get 5 BIRs and they've all been written within 3 minutes of each other, and so that signals a concern there. And are BIRs being turned into the data entry staff person on a regular basis? So a BIR only takes about a minute or less to enter into the system, but when you've got a really large stack, then that can turn in to a very long time. And so we want to make sure that you're thinking about when are BIRs turned in and what's that schedule for data entry. And lastly, are completed BIRs being entered in a timely manner? So that kind of goes hand in hand. So are we turning them in on a schedule, and are they being entered in a schedule? So these are just things to think about that can all affect the quality of your data. So going into the fun things, the Program Information tab. Now this is the tab where you enter your program demographics. And so the first thing that you'll do is you'll enter your program name, the school year, and then you'll enter your teacher names and the classroom IDs. So you want to make sure that you've assigned all of your classrooms an ID ahead of time, and that you have this key saved here, but also somewhere else, and that the teachers who are filling out their forms, either that they know if they're putting in their name or they're putting in their ID. So the program has a program level decision as to how you're going to do that. But BIRs, when they're entered and when they're summarized by the classroom ID. And you have room to enter up to 50 classrooms. And so if you've used version 2.0, you know that there was, I believe it was 30 classroom IDs. So now there's room for a little bit more. So you'll enter in all your teacher names, classroom IDs, and then you'll enter how many children are enrolled for that month in that classroom. And you'll do this for each one of those classrooms. And so, let's say this program started in September. That means that for August, everything is 0. And so then in September, at the beginning of the month, and this is my advice, is that in the beginning of the month, you would enter how many children are in each classroom. And then towards the end of the month, you revisit it. So if in the beginning of September, classroom number 1 had 10 children, then I would put in 10. And then let's say around mid-September, one of the children transferred into a different program, then that 10, I would leave it as a 10, even though technically at the end of September, there are only 9 children. And so I want to make sure that I have the maximum number of children that were in that classroom for the month. So if in classroom ID 1 started off with 10, and then mid-September, there were 9 children, then at the end of September, I still want to leave that number at 10. And then in October, if there's only 9 children, then at that point, I would go ahead and put a 9. So it's the max number of children. Then as you scroll down, you'll see that that gives you a running total for your program. So we know that this program here for the month of September had 273 children. And so it'll add up how many children are enrolled in the program. And then the next thing you'll do is you'll do enrollment by ethnicity. So what you'll enter is how many Hispanic or Latino children are in the program. And so in this program, there were 155 Hispanic or Latino children of any race. And then what the Excel does is it takes your total enrollment for the program, the 273, it subtracts it by 155 to give you 118. So you have 118 children who are not Hispanic or Latino. Now, enrollment by race, we want to know those 118 children here, what is their race? And so here, you're entering how many children for that month are of that race. And that 118, that total down here at the bottom, should equal the total of not Hispanic or Latino. Then you have enrollment by gender. So you'll enter how many female children. And so then you'll enter in this program 133 female children. And again, this takes your total enrollment, the 273, subtracts the 133 that we entered, and it gives you 140 male children. The same thing for IEPs. You're putting in how many children have an IEP, and it's doing the math for you to tell you how many do not. Dual language learners, you're putting in how many children are dual language learners, and it's subtracting to tell you how many are not. And then one thing that I want you to know is that these yellow ribbons here, the totals down here, the 273, 273, 273, 273, should all match your total for your program, okay? And then at the very end, you're putting in how many school days per month. Now, the spreadsheet will still work, even if you don't have your program demographics here. And I know some of the information, some programs may not have, and so you'll have to collect it, and that's okay. You can still collect BIRs, you can still enter your data, and you'll still get meaningful tables and charts. And then once you collect that information from your families, then you can go ahead and put that information in. So it shouldn't deter you from using the BIR spreadsheet, but you want to make sure that you get that information and that you enter it so that you can get the most utility from the spreadsheet. So then the next tab is the Child Enrollment tab. So the Child Enrollment tab, this is where you enter children once you receive a BIR, okay? The first time that you receive a BIR for that child, you enroll them in the system. That's what we mean by enrolling. We mean that you're actually adding them into the Child Enrollment tab. Now, the Child Enrollment tab only has the children who have BIRs. It does not have every child in the program. So I get asked, well, how do you know then for the formulas how many children are in the program, or how many children are of a specific race or ethnicity? That all comes from the Program Information tab. So this program has 273 children, but on my Child Enrollment tab, I have, I think it's about 160 something children that I have enrolled into the system that have at least one BIR. And so here, this is stop here. That is row 176 or something like that, and which means that you can enter up to 175 children with a BIR before you have to stop and contact me. And so once you receive a BIR, then at the bottom of the form is demographic information for the child. And so that's where you would enter. That's what you enter here. So you would type in the child name, the child ID, the gender. You have here as a dropdown, male or female, the non-dual language learner or dual language learner. Do they have an IEP? Yes or no? Are they Hispanic or Latino? And then their race. And then enrolled, if they are enrolled in the program, or disenrolled if they've left the program, and any notes. Now, you'll see here that for Hispanic or Latino children, I haven't entered a race. And now you can do that if you know it, but it isn't necessary as far as the calculations go, because any of the metrics that we use, we are only counting whether they are Hispanic or Latino. And then if they are not, then they're being counted by the race. And so not Hispanic or Latino, then you definitely should put a race. Hispanic or Latino, you don't need to put a race. Now, what happens if you do? Nothing. It's okay. So you can put Hispanic or Latino and put a race, but they'll only be counted for being Hispanic or Latino. So for me, I just didn't enter it, but that's up to you if you have that information or not. Now, one of the features of the 2.2 is a search function. And so let's say I don't remember if I entered a specific child. And so I'm saying I have a BIR, it's Nancy, and I'm wondering, did I put Nancy into the system already? You can just type into that little space here, press enter, and then it'll highlight the row wherever Nancy appears. And so then I can see, is this the Nancy I'm talking about? Yes, it is. Okay, she's in the system. And so you can put anything. So if I put Michael, then it'll highlight the two Michaels that I have in the system. If I put an ID, so I'm looking for C23, then it will show me C23. So I can put any search term that I want here, and then I can delete it, press enter, and then it takes away the highlight of that row. Another thing that you can do now is that you can filter. So if I want to sort, actually, I want to sort from A to Z in alphabetical order or anything like that, you can do that here. You can sort by any of these categories. And so this is really helpful to make sure that you don't enroll children twice and that you know that you've got the right information. So that's the Child Enrollment tab. The BIR Data Entry tab, this is where you're actually entering the BIR forms. And so one row is one BIR form, okay? And so the first thing you would do is select your classroom ID. And so when you hit that drop down, if you don't have that many classrooms in your program, this might all be blank. But in order to see the IDs that you've entered, all you need to do is just scroll up and then you'll see the IDs. So you select there, and then the child ID is the same thing. If you don't see anything here, but you know that on the Child Enrollment tab, you've given the child an ID, then all you have to do is the same thing, just scroll up, and that ID should be there. Then you select the month of the incident, and then you type in the date, and then the time. Now the time, if you remember, that was one of the things I talked about as far as data entry errors. So the time, when you enter in the time, and you put 11:10, 11:10, and I press enter, it turns it into 11:10 a.m., which is correct, and I can continue. But 2:50, if I enter 2:50, it gives me 2:50 a.m. And so if you know the 24-hour thing, then you can go ahead and type that in. And so we'll say 14:50, and that's 2:50 p.m. That's what I wanted to put in there. So you can do that 24-hour military time. You can put that 14:50, or you can do 2:50. But then when you enter it, come up to your formula bar that's here, and go to that A and change that A into a P. And that works just as well. What you want to avoid doing is saying 250 2:50 p.m. because now this 2:50 p.m. is not the same. That's not a time. The 2:50 p.m. Once it's all together is not a time anymore. So you want to make sure that you're making sure that you're putting in that time and having the space between the time and the AM and the PM, and use either of those two methods to get the time in there. So then you put in your problem behavior, and so that's a drop down as well. It is in alphabetical order, if that helps. It's not in the order of the form, but it is in alphabetical order. The activity, who's involved, the possible motivation, the strategy or response that was used, and then administrative follow-up, and then any notes. And so it's a program level decision whether you're going to type in notes into this area or not. So if you want to type in notes, you can, and if not, then that's okay too. One of the differences here is you see when I scrolled over these columns here, they stayed. And so it's just to make sure that when you're scrolling over, especially on smaller screens, that you know who, what you're typing in, and that you're on the right row, and all of that. So that's a difference. If you don't like that, you can take it off. You can go up to the view, and then you can go to freeze panes and unfreeze panes, and that will stop this from staying where it's at. So the other difference is that this version 2.2 has room to enter 5,000 BIRs. So if you have 5,000 BIRs, then this will work for you. So one of the errors that we talked about here was typing in these here, and you want to pay attention to that, because let's say I write teacher, but I write teacher with the lowercase, and you see it'll take it as teacher with the lowercase because I've spelled it correctly as one of the responses in my dropdown. But then now in my summaries, it'll have teacher with the lowercase t. And so you want to be mindful of that. If you're typing in, I know as a data entry person that sometimes typing in is a lot easier than doing these drop downs. But you want to make sure that you're careful and that you are not adding new items to the analysis. The other thing is, if you do have a lot of BIRs that you're entering and you want that process to go a little quicker, one way that you can make it quicker, because the spreadsheet calculates as you enter your data. And if you have a small amount of data, that's no problem. It does it quickly. You don't even notice. But once you have a large amount of data, what happens is that Excel becomes sluggish, and then it starts calculating and taking time, and then it slows down your data entry, and you'll see a little message down here that says calculating and a percentage of it, you know, if it's how much it's completed. So one thing that you can do, if you get that and you see and you think you're like, man, this is taking a long time, is you can go up into the formulas, and then in formulas, you go over to this calculator where it says calculation options. You click on this down arrow, and then you click on manual. Now, Excel will not calculate as you enter data. It's not going to calculate anything. So you need to make sure that when you're done entering the data, that you go back to formulas, back to calculation options, and click on automatic. And once you press on automatic, then it'll calculate everything that you just entered. So you want to make sure that if it's acting sluggish, that you go ahead, turn it on manual, enter your data, and then go back and do it on automatic. So that is the last tab where you'll be entering anything into. After that, all of the tabs are just different analysis. So now let's go to the program summary tab. So the program summary tab gives you your program data at a glance. So it gives you all the different summaries. And so it tells you how many BIRs to date in the program, how many children with BIRs, and then it gives you that breakdown month by month. It also includes the average number of BIRs per child with a BIR. And so you have that information here. As you look over to the right, you have equity profile alerts, and we'll get into those later on in the spreadsheet. And the equity profile alerts, they are, you probably don't have anything probably clear. That's the normal view. And then if there is possible disproportionality in your program, then one of these alerts or any of these alerts will pop up. And so they will display, and once they're displayed, then that's just something for you to go back and to go take a look at these profile and see what is going on. And so with these, you can click on the alert, it takes you to the profile, and then you can look a little bit more about what's going on in the program. And so you have these for incidents. So these alerts here talk about the actual writing of BIRs. So are we writing more BIRs for a specific group than another? Then this looks at in-school suspension. So this looks at specifically of the BIRs that have been written have resulted in in-school suspensions for one group more than another. And then the same for out-of-school suspension and then dismissals. So those are links. You can click back, you can look at the profiles, and we'll go back and we'll take a look at that. Then to the right, you have quick links. And these are all of the tabs that are in this workbook. And so if you know that problem behavior is your favorite tab, you can just click on problem behavior and it'll take you directly to that tab. And all of these tabs have a back to program summary. So if you click on that back to program summary, it takes you back here. So any of these links, you can click on them, you can go take a look, and then come back to your program summary. So there's a note here to refresh your data before viewing charts and tables. And it tells you can go to your data, go to refresh all, click on that, or on your keyboard, hold down Control, Alt, and F5. Now this is really important because if once you come here, all of this will be fine, all of this will be fine, but then when you get down here, you might not have any bar charts. And you'll say, well, Myrna, this is not working. And I'll ask you, well, did you refresh your data? And usually that's the issue, is that you haven't refreshed. So make sure that you refresh your data each time that you've entered any data. So then you have the average number of incidents per day. And so like this chart here, you need to make sure if you don't see anything on that chart, it's probably because on the program information tab, you haven't entered how many school days per month. So as long as you've got how many school days per month, then you should have this bar chart. You have the percent of total BIRs per month. So how many of all of the 720 BIRs in this program, it looks like for May, it was about 20% of those BIRs, of 720 BIRs were in May. And any of these data points, if you just hover over it, it'll tell you the exact value. So you'll see in the little box that pops up for the point of March, the value is 11.3%. Then you have percent of children enrolled with a BIR, how many children for that month have a BIR. And then you have a table. So this table here is actually these 4 charts. It's this one, this one, this one, and this one right up here is in a table form. So if you're not a chart person, then you've got a table. So that information is all summarized in this chart here. Then as we go down, as we scroll down, now we have the different categories. So problem behavior. So of all of our problem behavior in our program, looks like 26% is physical aggression, 23% is non-compliance, 13% is unsafe behavior, and so on. And so what it'll do is it'll tell you in descending order, what are the major problem behaviors? And so kind of did this to make sure, sometimes you don't have a lot of time, but you can quickly see what those behaviors are. And then percent by activity. So where are these BIRs being written? Percent of BIRs by others involved. And again, these are programs at the program level. This is the program level view. And percent of BIRs to date by motivation. And so if you enter a handful of BIRs, you might not get a lot of change in these percents because you're talking about, this program, 720 BIRs. So if I were to enter a few more, 5 more, these numbers may not change dramatically. So the program view might look, pretty similar depending what's going on the program and how many BIRs you have. And one thing I also want to show you is here, click to dig deeper into others involved. And all of this does, if you click on it, it just takes you to the others involved tab. And so this was just if I'm looking at these charts and I'm saying, you know, centers indoors play, that is the activity where a lot of BIRs are being written, the majority of them. You know, I'm curious what's going on, then you could have a quick link to get back to that activity tab. So then we have the response. So are my teachers using more responses than others? Are there responses that maybe they're not using that they could be using? And then administrative follow-up, you know, is there any administrative action taken, you know, or is it mainly, you know, not applicable? So that gives you the program level what's going on. One thing I do want you to note is the y-axis. In administrative follow-up, it's 100%. In response, it's 45%. I'll scroll up. Motivation is 30%. Others involved is 30, and I believe these two are 30 as well. And so that's dynamic. So it depends on how many BIRs and what that percentage is what that y-axis will be. So make sure that you're paying attention to that as well. And then down at the very bottom, we have total number of children with BIRs. So this histogram, it has basically buckets. So think of them as buckets and say how many children in my program have one BIR. Of the children who have a BIR, how many have one BIR? 8. Of the ones, how many have 1 to 5 BIRs? It's 20. How many children have 5 to 10 BIRs? 11, and so on. So it tells you how many children for each one of those ranges. And it helps you identify too, like if you have this outlier here, 20 plus. So think of this like a bell curve. And usually that's probably what it's going to look like is, you know, kind of this average number of children with 1 to 5. And then, you know, are there outliers? And so here you'll see there's 7 children in this program with 20 plus BIRs. So, and then it gives you that proportion of the total population. And so that's here. So that's the program information tab. So that gives you a lot of information at a glance for your program. So now the next tab is the monthly BIRs by classroom ID. So here, what we're showing is in table form, all the classroom IDs, and these are of the classrooms that have been entered. How many, you know, these are the classrooms where there is at least one BIR for that classroom that was written and entered into the system. And so you have the classroom, and then you have the months and how many BIRs. So for classroom 4, 1 BIR written in September, 3 in October, 2 in December, 3 in January, for a total of 9 BIRs. And so you'll see here again, total number 720 and how that breaks down by classroom. You'll also see that in a chart. So next to the table, if you scroll and you're using this bar to scroll to get to the other side, you can also, if you click here, like somewhere blank, you can also use your arrows on your keyboard too. That works too. So total number of incidents by classroom ID. It shows you that same, here's classroom number 1. And I can see like, okay, this yellow bar here is for November. If I hover over it, it'll tell me, no, this is actually for May, and it's 108 BIRs. And so, you know, any of these bars, because it's hard to see, you can hover over it and then it will tell you what that is. So by classroom ID, the total number of BIRs, and then by month. Now, what you can do here with these filters here is if you only want to look at a specific classroom. So I only want to look at classroom number 1. And so it'll show me classroom number 1, the months where BIRs were written, the total number of BIRs for that classroom, and then it will also show me in a chart form. And so you'll see that for classroom number 1. Another thing that you can do is if you want to select multiple classrooms. So I want to look at classrooms 1, 2, and 3. What you can do is hold down your shift key, click on 2, click on 3, let go of your shift key, and now I have classroom 1, 2, and 3, and then that month by month view. And now you can see that. Now, if I only want to look at classroom 1, 2, and 3 for the month of January, I can click on January, and now it'll show me classrooms 1 and 2. It doesn't look like classroom number 3 had any BIRs for the month of January. I click on February with my shift key being held down, and now it shows me classroom 1, 2, and 3 for January and February. So you can do this. Anything that you want to see, you can use your filters here to filter your data. You can also use this if you have this multi-select tool. Some Excel programs have it and some don't. But what you can do is you can click on like classroom 1, use this multi-select tool, and now you can just kind of click. You don't have to use your keyboard anymore. You can just kind of click on, what you want to see, or click off if you don't want to see it. So this multi-select tool is kind of nice and handy. And then clear your filter. And so that's one thing you're going to see, that as I navigate the spreadsheet, when I use any of these filters, I always clear it before I go to the next tab. And that's really important because if you save it and then you come back, it will show still what you have filtered. It won't clear the filters for you. So you want to make sure that you clear those filters if you're kind of done using them at that time. One thing I wanted to show you here as well is this blank. So this blank option here, the way that this is summarizing, it's summarizing by the those 5,000 rows in the BIR spreadsheet, in the BIR Data Entry Tab. And so there's blanks because I only have 720 BIRs entered into the system. There are 4,280 blank cells. Now, it only reads it as blanks. It doesn't add it. But you want to remove that, especially if you're going to use this table or use this chart to present somewhere, or you want to print it. You want to make sure that you remove those blanks. And so how do you do that? So you can go here to month, this down arrow, and then there's a checkbox here that says blank. Just uncheck it, say OK, and now blank is gone. That's as simple as that. So you want to make sure that you unselect that blank because it's not necessary. The next tab is monthly BIRs by child ID. And this is the same idea as the classroom ID tab, but now we're looking by child. So by child ID. So here, this is in descending order. So your children with more BIRs are at the top. And so it shows you the child ID and then the months. And then that is also over here in a chart form. And so here, you have a couple of different filters on the left-hand side. So let's say I only want to look at January. I want to know which children have a BIR for the month of January, and it will show me. I'll display it as well. Let's say I only want to look at one child. I only want to look at child number 10, and it'll show me child number 10's data. So you can use any of these filters to filter this table and this chart to whatever it is that you want to see. Another way, problem behavior, if I want to know where the children with BIRs, where the problem behavior that was identified was verbal aggression. I click on that, and then it'll show me child 40, number 32, and number 15. And then how many BIRs total where verbal aggression was a problem behavior, and then how that breaks down month by month. And with any of these filters, like I showed you before, you can keep filtering. So if I want to look at a female, I can click on female, and then it'll show me that information. So, and you'll see that these filters, they keep on filtering as I filter. So when I clicked female, then child ID, now it only shows me child 40. And you can clear that, and you can clear that to go back to your normal view. Now here, what you also see is enrollment status. And so if you see it like this, where it says NA enrolled, disenrolled, then the disenrolled, you can click on the little plus, and then it will show you the children who have disenrolled from the program. And so this is important because if I'm looking at these data and I say, well, child 32 what did we do in October? That child 32 had, child 38 had 32 BIRs, and then after that, no more BIRs. What did we do? But if I look down here, child 38 actually disenrolled. And if I go back to my child enrollment tab, maybe there's a note that they disenrolled in October or November. So if I come back over here and I say, well, I'm looking for child 38, I look down here, oh, here he is. And yeah, he disenrolled. He disenrolled at the end of October. And that, could explain why there are no more BIRs after October. So that's the purpose of disenroll, so that you have a quick view of children that might have left the program. And then if you go back to that child enrollment tab, and if it's recorded there, then you can see if that kind of matches up. The next tab is problem behavior. Now the problem behavior, this is where we get into each one of those sections on the BIR form. Now the problem behavior tab, and the other tabs are set up in the same way, is you have the problem behavior, you have your filters down here. So you can filter these data by classroom ID, by month, by ethnicity, by race, by gender, IEP status, DLL status, or problem behavior itself. So you can filter these data using any of those filters. But what it gives you when you first look is the problem behavior, then by month. And this is also in descending order. So our top 3 problem behaviors: physical aggression, noncompliance, and unsafe behaviors. And then it shows you what that looks like month by month in the table, and then also in this chart. And so if you only wanted to look at physical aggression, I would click physical aggression, and now it would show me that in the table, and then it also shows me in the chart. So then it's not as useful here, because then, that it's 100% of the behavior, so it's not going to show anything here. So I would clear that. And then now, if I want to maybe look at a specific classroom, then it'll show me month by month what's going on. And then here, it shows me the percent of total incidents. So of all the BIRs for that classroom, it shows you how many incidents were for noncompliance and the percent of total incidents. So 36% of the BIRs were because of noncompliance, 16% unsafe behaviors. So it shows you that in the table. And then under that, it shows you a pie chart. So you have a pie chart of that same breakdown, the percent of total incidents. And then you also have bar chart. And so if you're not a pie chart kind of person, you have a bar chart. And so here it gives you that percent, the same 36% of noncompliance here, and then the total number of incidents is 94. That's what the little diamond is. You'll see over here is that other axis over here, and that's where those little orange diamonds. And that is the total number. So 94 incidents is 36%, and then that's here as well. So it's up, it gives you the same information in 3 different ways. So you have it in a table, you have it in a pie chart, and you have it in this bar chart. Then below that, you have problem behavior analysis by category. And so if you have downloaded the database, the BIR database decision-making guide, that's where it'll explain how you might use this. And so if I want to know, if I'm looking at a problem behavior and I'm looking at, let's say, inconsolable crying, then I would click on that. And then it would show me what activity is inconsolable crying occurring the most. Rival, centers indoors play, and circle in large group. Who's involved? No one. And the teacher, assistant teacher. And as I scroll down, what's the possible motivation? Either to obtain desired activity, or the teacher does not know. And the response is usually to provide physical comfort, something else, a verbal reminder, and the administrative follow-up is usually not applicable. And so that kind of breaks down a problem behavior that you're looking at into all of those other categories. And then you can also scroll, filter any of these other filters. That is the problem behavior category. And so then the next tab is activity. So activity, now this tab is set up the same way. You have the filters on the left-hand side. It has the table by month. It has that bar chart. Then it has the table of percent of total incidents by activity and the total number of incidents in descending order. It has the pie chart, and it has that bar chart that has the percentage and the total number. But what it also has is this other table, this other green table on the right-hand side. And this looks at activity by problem behavior. So we see that centers indoor play is where the majority of the incidents are occurring. But what are the incidents? What is the problem behavior that is occurring during centers indoor play? And that's what this table shows you. It says, well, 26% of the incidents are in centers indoor play. And then if we look here, we'll see that of those incidents, 68 or 9% is physical aggression occurring during centers. And then it looks like unsafe behaviors, so 5%. And so it breaks it down, the problem behavior that's occurring during each one of those activities. And that is the end of that actual page. So you have to scroll down, depending on how many items there are. But this tab is now similar to the other tabs. So others involved set up in that same way, the filters, the table, the chart, this table here, the percent of total incidents, total number of incidents, the pie chart, who's involved, and then the others involved, and then the problem behavior that's occurring. Now, one thing I want to show you here is with these pie charts, you see that these labels kind of run into each other. And so one thing you can do is you can click on the label, click it again to the one that you want to move, and you can move it. Hold down your mouse, and then now you can move it out of the way so that you can better read that pie chart. So before you print it or anything like that, you can go ahead and do that so that you have a better view. Possible motivation is set up in that same way. Your filters, your table, your chart, your other table here that has percent of total incidents, total number of incidents, motivation by problem behavior, your pie chart, and then your bar chart. The next tab is response, also set up the same way. Administrative follow-up. That's also set up the same way. Okay, so now then we get into the classroom summary. So the classroom summary tab is where you would look at individual classrooms. So you want to know what's going on in a specific classroom. This is a tab where you can go. So the monthly BIRs by classroom ID, that was this one over here. That just tells you how many BIRs per classroom. But this tab here, the classroom summary, actually breaks it down for you. So the classroom summary, the view is all classrooms, but here you would select the classroom. So I just want to look at classroom number 1. You would select classroom number 1, and now it shows you right below your filter, it shows you the children in that classroom with BIRs. So you'll see that child 1, 251 incidents, child 32 had 4 incidents, for a total for that classroom of 255 incidents. And so then you'll see by month, how does that look like per month? You have the table, your bar chart. What's the problem behavior that's occurring in descending order? Looks like it's non-compliance and safe behaviors. In what activity? Who's involved? What's the motivation? What was the teacher's response? And any administrative follow-up. And then what you also have down at the bottom is the incidents by time of day. And so as long as you've entered the time and you've entered it correctly, what the Excel will do is it'll round up or down to the nearest half hour. And then it tells you now you can see how many incidents by time of day. And so you'll see, it looks like a majority of the incidents are occurring around 10. So 9:30, 10:30, around there. So you kind of get an idea of where those incidents are mainly occurring. Now, if you wanted to, so you can look, mainly it's to look at one classroom at a time. And so one thing that I wanted to show you here was that, so the classroom number, ID number 1, 255 incidents, child number 1 has 251. Now I want to know more about child number 1. So now you can go to the child summary tab, which is the next tab over, and now you might look at child number 1 here. So child number 1, if I select child number 1, then it'll show me all of that information for child number 1. So now I can see the classroom ID is number 1. Okay, yeah, that makes sense with what I saw in the classroom summary tab. It gives me demographic information for that child, so I know child number 1 is a male, not a dual language learner, has an IEP, he's not Hispanic or Latino, he's white, and then he's still enrolled in the program. And then I can see how those 251 BIRs break down over the month. Problem behavior, it looks like it's not compliance, followed by unsafe behaviors during centers indoors play, and that usually involves the support or administrative staff. The teacher believes the motivation is to avoid the task, and the response is usually a verbal reminder with no administrative follow-up for that child. And then when I look down here, total number of incidents by time, this does the same thing. So it's looking at time, but telling me how many incidents by time. So I see that the majority of the incidents are occurring around 10 a.m. So that is a change from the version 2.0, is that here you had incidents by day, but the way that chart was displayed, it wasn't very useful because it would skip days, and it just wasn't as useful, so I changed it to incidents by time. And so you have this information here. One thing I wanted to know is a child that is in multiple classrooms. And so child number 11, this is what I mean. So child number 11 started off in a classroom, started off in classroom number 4, then transferred over to classroom number 14, or started off in 14, and then transferred into classroom number 4. And so what you do is in the child enrollment tab, you just make a note that the child was in classroom 14 in September and then transferred over, mid-September to classroom number 4, something like that, so that you know why 2 IDs show up for this child. You don't have to enroll the child twice. So you just enroll child number 11 one time. You enroll that child one time, and then when you enter the BIR, you just select the classroom where the BIR, where the BIR was written. You don't have to enroll the child twice, and then that shows up here, so that you're aware that that's occurring. All right. So then we have the distribution by class ID. So the distribution by class ID tab is just a place for you to look at. It has all of the filters. And so you might just go in here just because you have a question about something or you want to check something. And so this has all of those filters here. And the difference from version 2.0 is that now it has child IDs as well. So it helps you, if you don't want to look at child IDs, you only want to look at classroom IDs, you can press on this little minus tab here next to the classroom ID, and that collapses the child IDs. So that is entirely up to you. The default view is to show those child IDs. So if I have a question, and what I mean by if you just have a question, let's say, I want to know, is a lot of physical aggression occurring during outdoor play? I can click on physical aggression, then I can click on outdoor play, and then I can see, well, out of my 720 VIRs, there's only 25 VIRs that were written for physical aggression during outdoor play. So, this is just the place to come in and let's just play with the filters. So again, if you have a question or something you want to check, you can come in here and do that. And as you click on a filter, so as I click physical aggression and I click outdoor play, you'll see that a lot of these filters start to filter out options. And so as I say, again, remove from activity, very specific. So all of the other filters, they adjust based on what I have selected. Okay, so make sure that, again, once you're done, you clear all of those filters. Now we get into the equity profiles. So the equity profiles, we'll go back to the program summary. Remember I told you if you have an alert, they will display some text here. The default view is no text, so just blank white boxes here. And then if you have an alert, an equity profile alert, then it'll display check this equity profile. So you can click on it and you can go back to it. What you have here is a table of metrics. So there's a lot of numbers here. And what we've done is that we've highlighted the value that has caused the alert. And so in the spreadsheet, what causes the alert is the child composition value. And so once that child composition value reaches a certain threshold, or it's more than that threshold, then that sets off the alert. So here it tells you how many children are enrolled in the school by the different groups, then how many number of children in the group with the BIR, and the number of BIRs from the group. And then it calculates the percent enrollment, and then it calculates the different metrics. And then it highlights only the child composition value and the risk ratio value. Those are the two values that we decided that you should focus on when you come back to look at the equity profile. The red and the yellow, there's no difference as far as which one is more important than the other. It's just the colors that I happen to choose, and that's really all there is to it. But to understand the metrics, then what we have here are different statements to describe what these metrics mean. And so if I say, I see that 76.3% is my child composition value for Hispanic or Latino children. So I'm wondering what exactly does that mean? If I scroll down to Hispanic or Latinos of any race, I'll see that there's a statement here. Of the 38 children with at least one BIR, 76.3% are Hispanic or Latino of any race. This group makes up 56.5% of the total child enrollment. And so that gives you some information about why that alert that went off. And then as you scroll down, you'll see that Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander is blank, and you're like, well, what happened there? The reason it's blank is because there are no children enrolled. That's the only reason it's blank. And then as we scroll down, you have bar charts. So you have bar charts that shows you the total enrollment for that group, the number of children with BIRs, and the total number of BIRs for that group. And then it also has the risk ratio values in a bar chart form, where 1.0 is equal and anything over something that we want to look at. So you have that here. And then as you keep on going, then you have the gender profile. And again, you have all of our numbers here. Okay. And then our statements, our accompanying statements. We have it by IEP status and dual language learner status. So these orangey yellow tabs here are about incident frequency. So that's just looking at, are we writing more BIRs for one group than another? And then the next tab is the child ID by ISS, OSS, dismissal. And so this is if I want to identify, do I have any in-school suspensions? So I have highlighted here, 0 equals no, 1 equals yes. So I want to know, do I have any in-school suspensions? I would go to this filter. I'd click on 1 because 1 is yes. And it says, I do. I have it looks like 10 in-school suspensions for 4 children. If I want to know out-of-school suspensions, I click 1. I do have out-of-school suspensions, 3 out-of-school suspensions for 2 children. I clear that filter and I want to know, do I have any dismissals? I press 1 and I do. I have 1 expulsion for 1 child. And so that's what this tab helps you with. And then you have, if you just want to look at event by ethnicity. So I want to know how many Hispanic or Latino children have had an in-school suspension, out-of-school suspension, or a dismissal. I can click on that, and then it will show me the table of all of the Hispanic or Latino children that have had any of those events. Okay. So then we move into those tabs. So in-school suspension by race, ethnicity. So here it's only looking at number of BIRs that resulted in an in-school suspension. And so we have our enrollment and then number of children in each group with an in-school suspension and how many suspension events. So we'll see like this here for white, we have 1 child who is white who had 7 in-school suspensions. Okay, and so we have that's the information. So if you wanted to know that, like how many children and how many events, you have that here. And then you have your statements and then your bar charts. Then next you have, again, by gender, by IEP status, dual language learner status. And one thing I have here, especially in these suspensions and dismissal, is this little note here. So you see here it says division 0, division 0. Usually you see that, you think there's an error, you think something's wrong. But in this case, there isn't anything wrong. It just can't divide by 0 because there's nothing to compare this to. And that's because there's nothing to compare it to. Because no dual language learner students have had an in-school suspension. So in this equation, there isn't anything to divide by. And that's why you have this div 0. There just isn't a comparison group. Okay? Now, you have by race, ethnicity, out-of-school suspension, gender, IEP, and dual language learner status. And then we have dismissal. Okay. All right, so that's the last tab for the equity profile alerts, and that's the end of the spreadsheet. There aren't any other tabs got, but I think we've looked at quite a few. So these metrics here, as long as you've entered in your program information tab, as long as you've entered that breakdown here, as long as you've entered this, then you'll have data on all of those tabs back there, on all of the equity profiles. If you haven't entered this data here, you will not get any information. It won't give you that data. So you want to make sure that you do enter this information so that you do have those profiles filled out so that you have that information. And like I said, it's not something that if you don't have it when you first use the BIR spreadsheet, it is something that, it won't stop you from using the spreadsheet. Come back and add in that information once you have it. So if you have any issues, you have any questions, you run into anything, something's not working quite the way you think that it should be, please feel free to email me. So again, my information is here on the instructions tab. Let me know what's going on and we'll take a look at it together.